In today's video I want to introduce you to creature baits when it comes to lure fishing for bass, as if it's not hard enough. We know we can catch bass on hard lures late in the summer here in the UK. But what about spring? What about March, April, May? We've got a good selection of creature baits to try. Inside the shrimp net we're getting things like prawns, shrimps, but also little flatfish as well. So we've got these Westin flat mats to give a go. I want to give a little idea how we're going to retrieve these so-called creature baits, because it's very different to those hard lures and shads, sand eel imitations that we use. Off with something a little bit easier today, which is pier fishing. That way we're directly in contact with the line. We're not so worried about snags. So this is a really good quality version. This is the Dark Sleeper from Megabass, and you can see that the hook is hidden there. You see that? And there's enough softness both in those fins, you see how they're using the dorsal fins to hide the hook, and in the body of the lure, that should be able to hook a bass. I've just tied it on direct rather than use a lure clip, and it's got a weighted belly in there, and the idea is you're going to fish that off the bottom. Now I have had bass off the pier like this one using prawn lures. I have never had a lure caught bass on a creature bait like this or a flat mat type flatfish lure, so a lot of this is just experimentation. And if you're here to see fantastic catches, maybe it's not the video for you. This is just a beginner's guide to the lures. Come on to the bait caster in a minute. I'm using braid, and then I've got a good 1.5 meters of fluoro on there. So we just drop this down. Just going to feel for it to hit the bottom over here. So we will be looking at using this in and around the reefs, but for here I obviously don't want that lure right up at the top on the surface of the water. It's a case of sort of bouncing it along the bottom. We've got a bit of shingle, a bit of mud here. Just having a play and feel when it bumps across the bottom. You want to know when the tide is moving underneath the pier. You want to trot it down the tide, and then you want to know if it's moving away from the pier. You can almost cast under the pier so that the lure is travelling in the direction of the flow. It's not moving much. I mean, at the moment I'm just figuring out where that tide is. Well, it's a cracking day, still a little bit cold. We're in March. I just want to try and get in a couple of sessions before this gully water comes. We get this May rot here on the south coast, detritus in the sea. It's not the most interesting of piers, Hastings. You never quite know whether it's open for fishing. Sometimes they charge, sometimes they don't. Occasionally they'll close early, so you never quite know. It's probably not worth a visit unless they sort out the fishing side of things here. Just trying to get that little goby lure to behave like a goby should. So this is a high tide 5-piece lure rod. It's excellent, really good. I'm enjoying this. But on this one, just going to have a floating prawn and then a little cheb weight on there. So the prawn floats, but the weight, if you bounce the weight along the bottom, the idea is it can animate that prawn a bit. These voodoos look really good in the water. This is the live target version. That looks the most realistic to me. There's a few sort of Amazon ones there and the Z-Man ones. You can get loads of different creature baits. Just have a little look at the selection here. well, surely a bass will think this is a crab or maybe a lobster. You can tie them on with these so you can get different type of Ned. You get these different type of Ned rigs, normally with something for a 5.0, as long as you've got enough weight to get it down. You can see this one's looking a bit battered, not through catching load of fish. You can see here as you look through this video, just bouncing it up and down. It's not quite how one performs. Bouncing it up and down like that, I don't think you need to do that. Sort of minimal movement seems to be best. And you know, similar here, these small ones, and actually there are companies that make cheaper versions, so we're going to give those a try as well. You see here that the hook again is hidden within the softer part, and there's a weight in here, but you can see how that would, you know, look enticing to a bass. Early season they're not up in the water, the bass, chasing bait fish so much, but they might be nose down, particularly in and around the piers and estuaries as well if you fish there. One thing I was thinking of doing is adding bait additive to these sort of things. You can get some really good goos and stuff, you know, go inside the flaps and put the oil in there, put the stuff in there. It's the dark sleeper, and if you compare it, I'm just going to show you, this one here was like a cheap Temu one, and the eyes come off. The weight isn't great, and the worst of the worst thing with these, the old hooks go. So I wouldn't recommend you buy super cheap copies. Go with the real thing, and then you might consider, I think I've got one in here somewhere. This is a Lures for Bass. Again, it is quite obviously a copy, but the hooks are a bit better certainly than the Temu Amazon style. But the daddy are the dark sleepers. Range of colours, just that's so much better made. Beautiful little thing. They say that lures catch anglers as well, but we're hoping to catch a fish on this. One of the most interesting things here for me is going to be these Westin flat mats. Going to be the Westin flat mats, because they are a flat fish, and look at that. So we'll have a little go with this now into underneath the pier, because I know, you know, we use the shrimp nets, and you do find plenty of these size flatfish, blonde rays and plaice mainly, I think, maybe sole in there. And the idea again with that weight is to move that across the bottom and just slide it across the bottom. So let's put that on and give that a go. Prawns like this, and then obviously you're going to drift those along, changing the weight on that. But I'm going to try these rattles because prawns click, and that is the big attraction of a prawn over, say, something like a shrimp, and they will actually click, these prawns. So I'm going to add one of these to them and just try free lining it to start off with. These are a little bit big for these truss end ones, these extra large, and you can see how tough. You can see how tough that plastic is. Look. Just wanted to go in. A little bit unorthodox. There's no room for the big ones. I'm going to go that way round because the weight's attached to the hook and the hook's not good enough. Another example, it's a good one. And that's a natural food that the bass will be used to seeing. You've just got to have that disorientated by the waves in and around the structure. So under the pier is quite a good one for that. Oh, back on the flatfish, this is the Westin flat mat. You can see it's quite a white, you know, bright coloured one. And I think the idea with these is obviously, you know, they do bury themselves in the sand a bit. Just trying to drag it through a bit of sand. If I have a bass on one of these, I'll be amazed. You'll have to keep watching the channel, see if I get one over the next few months. So it's quite versatile, this rod. I've got a 28 gram flatfish lure on, of all things, and I'm just letting that drift in the tide, lifting it up, tapping it. That's really good. It's just that section there, it's quite stiff. So this is a likely looking spot for trying a creature bait. We've got a couple of options here. The tide is ebbing. We're going to lose this. We need to be out there really casting into the deeper bits. I think I'm just going to take a little walk out, and then what we're going to do, I'm going to tie on one of these. These are a sleeper crawl. I am missing some bait additive, which would be quite good. See, I'm not really retrieving the lure, I'm just lifting it up, and what I want it to look like is, well, like this really. So if you were to imagine the lure is on dry land and you dragged it in, it would have that sort of action. But when you put it in the water, defensive position, see how minimum movements on the retrieve are going to help. Cracking rod, this one. This is the tail walk. It's a 7 to 35 gram. For this sort of fishing in calm conditions, of course, you can probably get a lighter rod, something like a 28, up to 28 grams, something with a good tip. You can flick the bait up and down, but a lot of sensitivity in here, because I can actually feel when that lure is bouncing off the bottom, or if it's in seaweed. Obviously I've got braid on here, sort of 18 pound braid, 18 pound fluoro. You can feel it off the rod tip through this blank. Bouncing it off the bottom, but it's sort of shooting round to the right. That said, I mean, it's pretty snaggy in there, getting away with it. Okay, so casting out, and I'm going to let it drift. It's on the bottom now, and I'm just feeling, I can feel that line being taken by the tide. So I want to retrieve into it a little bit, and this is where having a half decent rod helps. I'm pointing down towards the bait here. I'm trying to lift the rod tip up a little bit just to overcome that little bit of wave action there between those two little reefs. Now, I've had bass here before, and that's why we're here, but of course it's very early season. It's nice to be able to fill that lure. Yeah, I'm feeling everything here. So now I know it's through the seaweed. I'm pulling it through seaweed. Such a great rod, this as well. Really wish I'd have discovered these sooner. Tail walk. Left to draw it back because the wind's cutting across left to right. And then just bring it through. Well, look, we've turned round and we lost the water there, so that's not fishable. You can see why. You just need to bump it. I mean, this is very different, obviously covered with water, but these little goby, I suppose it is, imitations are they're not out and swimming at speed, so you just got to think like a little rock fish would, or a rock pool fish would. So where do you go from here? Well, you probably one up on me on these creature baits, but if you are new to it, I do hope you give it a go. It does sort of open up the fishing out of the usual months, and yeah, I've got a lot to learn here, I think. I don't know if there's anything you can help us with if you've fished with these sort of lures, or even had a fish using a creature bait or something a little bit odd. Let everyone know in the comments, and we'll compare notes. But thanks for watching. I hope that gives a little bit of a good idea what we can expect using creature baits. Well, no fish, but yeah. Stay tuned. I'm going to do my best to catch one.
This is where I've lost the lure.
There it is. Brilliant. Oh, fantastic.